Hi guys! Today we're going to talk about copper IUDs. This is a topic I feel very strongly about just because there's not much information on this out there and there's not many people that know this about copper IUDs, but I think it's something that is very, very important for people to know, and I don't know why it's not spoken about more often. So copper IUDs are a form of birth control that goes up inside your uterus, and it's a tiny, tiny little piece of T-shaped plastic with copper wrapped around it. Now there's two types, there's hormonal and there's non-hormonal. The reason why I chose this version is because my body is extremely sensitive. Anything that affects my hormone really affects me negatively, and when I saw all the information about it on Planned Parenthood and online, and some people had really great reviews, I was like, why not? It's non-hormonal. If anything, I can just take it out. It's just so tiny, they just put it up your uterus, but it just feels like you have a really bad period cramp. That night till the day after, I was honestly in pain. in pain, but from then on I didn't really feel much. Some people will have really bad period cramps around their periods, but for me it just was a little more intense, but it was completely bearable. Another side effect from copper IUDs is that you bleed very heavily. I was almost having my period every day for all those months that I had it in. It was more like spotting, but on the times where I would actually have a cycle, I would have a very, very heavy flow. They say that after a few months, your body kind of eases off and your cycle starts to regulate a little bit. I looked online and some people said that they've been bleeding straight for like 3 years, so yeah. So at first the IUD was working great. It didn't give me any problems other than the spotting and gradual cramps here and there. Now I already knew I suffered from anxiety for a very long time. That wasn't anything new to me. For some reason, maybe about 2 to 3 months in, I started noticing that my anxiety was getting a lot more severe. It was getting to the point when I'm in the subway on my way home, I would just feel like I needed to start crying, and I just needed to be home at that moment or else I was gonna freak out. This part was where it got a little bit tricky because I started getting all these thoughts in my head where I would argue with myself constantly. I'd be walking out in the street and then somebody would be staring at me, and then I would notice that, and immediately when people stare at me, sometimes I start getting a little bit of anxiety. In my head it'd be like, oh, that person's staring at you, whatever. And then like another thought would be like, I bet you think that person's staring at you because you're so narcissistic, right? Because you're so self-obsessed. At the same exact time it'd be another voice going like, no, but I know I'm not narcissistic. I know that blah, blah, blah. Another argument would be like, no, but you are. Like, I cannot explain it because it was so many thoughts at the same exact time that I felt conflicted in every emotion. So I would just shut down. How I can explain it is I was just constantly fighting myself. As time went on, it got to a point where I would start breaking down, like literally at 10 a.m. in my kitchen, nobody's home, I'm by myself, just start breaking down and just like head on the counter sobbing because I didn't know what was going on with me and I didn't know how to control it. Like if there was a camera around, I would have looked batshit crazy. Yeah. The biggest thing I noticed was I didn't know what thoughts were mine, and I didn't know who I was anymore. There was a point where I was like, I'm just fighting with myself so much that I don't know whose side I'm on, and I just felt like I lost myself, and I literally felt like I was becoming crazy. And it got to a point where, this sounds so extreme, but it was so intense and I couldn't bear the constant arguing with myself 24/7 for like 2 months straight. I would be in the train and I'd be like, I wish I was dead so that this would just stop. I remember coming home that day and sitting on my bed. I started to pray almost. I was just so desperate that I was like, I just need help. I remember I was in the shower and I was just like, hands on my knees, like sobbing, praying. Instantly I got this thought in my head. It was like copper IUD. And then all of a sudden, I remember reading these articles about copper toxicity and how it affects your mental health and whatever. So after I got out of the shower, I looked up on my phone, copper IUD and mental illness. Something about copper toxicity came out, and a lot of personal testimonials by women who were affected the same way I was were talking about basically everything I was feeling. Like I felt like I was reading my own diary, and that's when I realized this shit is real. And I started looking up copper toxicity and everything matched, and it started talking about how you could start developing paranoid schizophrenia, which is exactly what I was having. So when I looked up paranoid schizophrenia, one of the main symptoms was not knowing what were your own thoughts or not. Feel like you're constantly arguing with yourself. I immediately made the appointment. I was like, get the shit out of me right now. Planned Parenthood doesn't talk about this kind of stuff. Doctors don't really talk about this kind of stuff. I don't feel like many people know, honestly. So now I've taken the copper IUD out of me, but it doesn't mean that it's all good and dandy after that. I had to make sure that I got all the copper out of my body and from my liver and from my bloodstream. So I was avoiding foods high in copper. I started taking vitamin D, which is really good for mental health. And I was taking some zinc tablets just to kind of level off the copper. The thought of having copper in your uterus, pumping that much copper into your liver and your bloodstream, can be a really good thing. Some people even break out from it. But do your research, talk to your doctors. You know your body more than anybody else. If you think you can handle it, try it. I know that copper toxicity was giving me paranoid schizophrenia. If you know that your body is very, very sensitive to things, maybe skip on the copper IUD and try something else. This is what happened to me. Just wanted to put it out there in case it helps anyone. So, until next time.